Serangan jantung antara punca kematian tertinggi di Malaysia.
Di tepi jalan di Lipis, Pahang, Isnin lalu disahkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Meninggal dunia dipercayai mengalami serangan jantung ketika memandu.
The number one killer we call ischemic heart disease or heart attack, basically referring to the disease affecting the cornea artery.
Seorang wanita warga emas ditemui meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Dilaporkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung di kediamannya malam tadi.
Serangan jantung antara punca kematian tertinggi di Malaysia.
Di tepi jalan di Lipis, Pahang, Isnin lalu disahkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Meninggal dunia dipercayai mengalami serangan jantung ketika memandu.
The number one killer we call ischemic heart disease or heart attack, basically referring to the disease affecting the cornea artery.
Seorang wanita warga emas ditemui meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Dilaporkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung di kediamannya malam tadi.
Serangan jantung antara punca kematian tertinggi di Malaysia.
Di tepi jalan di Lipis, Pahang, Isnin lalu disahkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Meninggal dunia dipercayai mengalami serangan jantung ketika memandu.
The number one killer we call ischemic heart disease or heart attack, basically referring to the disease affecting the cornea artery.
Seorang wanita warga emas ditemui meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Dilaporkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung di kediamannya malam tadi.
Serangan jantung antara punca kematian tertinggi di Malaysia.
Di tepi jalan di Lipis, Pahang, Isnin lalu disahkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Meninggal dunia dipercayai mengalami serangan jantung ketika memandu.
The number one killer we call ischemic heart disease or heart attack, basically referring to the disease affecting the cornea artery.
Seorang wanita warga emas ditemui meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Dilaporkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung di kediamannya malam tadi.
Serangan jantung antara punca kematian tertinggi di Malaysia.
Di tepi jalan di Lipis, Pahang, Isnin lalu disahkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Meninggal dunia dipercayai mengalami serangan jantung ketika memandu.
The number one killer we call ischemic heart disease or heart attack, basically referring to the disease affecting the cornea artery.
Seorang wanita warga Emas ditemui meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung.
Dilaporkan meninggal dunia akibat serangan jantung di kediamannya malam tadi.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited to be here. My name is Ellen Shutt, and I am the Executive Director of GOED, which is the Global Organization for EPA and DHA Omega-3s. And we are a trade association that represents the entire omega-3 category, and Holista is one of our members. And it's really important to be a member of GOED because it means that you are producing really high-quality products that are important, that consumers can trust. And the Pristine brand is one of the member companies that we are very excited to be associated with. So today we are here to talk about omega-3s and the benefits, particularly for heart health. And so I want to just quickly introduce our speakers. The first speaker will be Alana Natker, who is GOED's Director of Healthcare and Consumer Communications. And she is a registered dietitian and a scientific expert about all things omega-3. And then we have Dr. Rajan Manakar, who is the CEO of Holista, who will give you some additional information. And then at the end, we'll have questions, Q&A session. So please feel free to type in your questions and we will get to as many as we can. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Alana.
Hi, thank you. So as Ellen said, I am with GOED as the Director of Consumer and Healthcare Practitioner Communications. So I'm here to talk to you today about omega-3s, what they are, how they work, and why they're important for heart health in particular. They have numerous benefits, but today we're going to be focused on heart health. So before we get into all of the science, and I won't get too deep into the science, but before we get into it, I just want to make sure that we have a foundation in what we're talking about in terms of omega-3s. So let's just talk about fats. Fats as part of the diet. When it comes to talking about fats, there's many different categories, and they're all related. So starting on the far left, categories of fats include saturated fats, such as like butter, and unsaturated fats, such that you would find like in oils. So saturated tend to be solid at room temperature, and unsaturated tend to be liquid at room temperature. And then of the unsaturated fats, we have monounsaturated and we have polyunsaturated. So monounsaturated is just a degree of saturation, and poly, you have several degrees of saturation. Of the polys, we have omega-6s and omega-3s, and that has to do just with their fatty acid, where the degrees of saturation happens. And in the omega-3s, there are 3 different categories, especially when it comes to types. So, this is the omega-6. This is like canola oil is an example of an omega-6. And with omega-3s, there's ALA omega-3s that you tend to find in plant-based sources, such as chia seeds. And then there's EPA and DHA omega-3s that are in like salmon or fish, fatty fish.
Alana?
Yes.
Excuse me. You're showing the slides, the small version of the slide where we could see the next one. I think maybe you need to switch your screen so we could see the full view.
I don't know how to do that.
There you go. Perfect.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Ellen. Okay, so there's our fatty acids overview. Now, when it comes to fatty acids within the body, this is a very messy slide. And again, it's very, there's a lot of stuff going on here. But what this is trying to say is the omega-6s in your body and the omega-3s in your body that you get from the diet, they can go through different processes within the body to go down into other forms. So, linoleic acid and alpha linoleic acid, or ALA, omega-3s, you have to get those from the diet. Your body cannot make those fatty acids. So when you do get those from the diet, and like I said, ALA comes from like flaxseed or chia seed or just other typical plant-based sources, it can break down into EPA and DHA, which you see in the darker shades down further. And those go through different enzymatic processes to get all the way down to the EPA and DHA. So while your body can actually make EPA and DHA, the process is multi-step. It is not very efficient. And as you can see from the EPA and from the omega-6s and the omega-3s, even the very first step in these processes, there's a limit there's a competition rather of that very first enzyme and all the different enzymes down below. So the process tends to favor omega-6s and not so much the omega-3s. So when it comes to going from ALA to EPA and DHA, like I said, it's not very efficient. It's best to get EPA and DHA directly from the diet, directly from fish and supplements that give you EPA and DHA omega-3s. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about consumer knowledge about omega-3s and how consumers in Malaysia, for example, compared to other countries, neighboring countries, countries around the world in terms of knowledge. So the good news is that awareness of omega-3s is pretty high around the world. As you can see, it's well over 90% in much of the world, at least the countries that I pulled from the data that GoEd has available from our consumer data that we do every few years. So awareness is high. When it comes to health concerns of folks around the world, you can also see trends such as most people around the world are concerned about their overall health or their family health. Other things like heart health, which is what we're going to talk about today, ranks a little bit lower, or it can vary, I guess, from country to country. But when it comes to omega-3s, it's very important to consider omega-3s and the effects that they have on heart health, especially as you might have seen from the video at the beginning of this presentation, that heart disease and heart attacks are a leading killer, not just of folks in Malaysia, but around the globe. So, and omega-3s can help. EPA and DHA omega-3s can help. When it comes to why people choose omega-3 products from around the world, what influences them, we know that health practitioners, such as your doctors, your nurses, maybe pharmacists, anybody in the health industry has a huge influence on the products that you consume, the omega-3 products or any health products that you may consume. And also knowing that you're choosing a quality product is very important. And that's why companies that are members of GOED, the Global Organization for EPA and DHA omega-3s, they all have signed an affidavit of quality. It's part of a voluntary monograph that all GOED members, including Pristine Health, have signed to that adheres them to standards that are as strict, if not stricter, than those around the world for quality and ethics. So with any GOED product, including the Pristine Health products that you would have, those are adhered to certain standards of quality. So a good product. Okay, so now that we know a bit about what consumers know, let's talk specifically about the heart health benefits of EPA and DHA omega-3s. And we know there's over 40,000 research studies that have been done on omega-3s, 4,000 human clinical trials, more than 4,000 human clinical trials. There is an abundance of research on these nutrients, and heart health is the one that has probably the most robust body of science when it comes to EPA and DHA omega-3s. So from that research, we know that omega-3s, EPA and DHA, helps reduce the risk of death from heart disease or sudden cardiac death. So coronary heart disease. So the little arteries around your heart. If those arteries are clogged, if those can contribute to some sort of heart disease, death is usually imminent. It's very scary to have coronary heart disease and sudden cardiac death. When it comes to omega-3s, there's a lot of research showing that they help reduce the risk of heart attack, including fatal heart attacks. A lot of omega-3s that are prescribed by physicians are done to help lower triglycerides. They're usually omega-3s at a very high level that are done to lower triglycerides. But even absent of a prescription, they are known as an effect to help lower triglycerides. They also help improve the blood vessel function. So as you saw in the video too, how the blood vessels in your body are able to function, and they help lower your blood pressure, which again contributes to heart health and blood vessel function as well. I don't know if any of you have heard of these three studies. I mean, in the health professional world, of course, we've been talking about these studies quite a bit. These three came out all around the same time back in 2018, so relatively recently. There were studies done on omega-3s, some of them just EPA and some on EPA and DHA, to show different effects. And they were all pretty major studies. So Ascend, which was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, had over 15,000 subjects with people with diabetes and found that there was a statistically significant reduction in vascular death associated with EPA and DHA intake. So that was a positive study showing a beneficial effect of EPA and DHA on vascular death. Reduce It was a study that was done by a pharmaceutical company in which subjects were given 4 grams, so a very large dose of an EPA-only drug, and assess their cardiovascular events. And we saw a major reduction in cardiovascular and cardiac events associated with intake of that EPA product. And then Vital, which is a study that was done in the United States, that was overseen by the government agency here. That was a vitamin D and omega-3 trial, and we saw significant risk reduction in heart attack, including the fatal heart attacks and coronary heart disease. And there's been further analyses of the Vital research that we are continuing to see over time. That's showing some good benefits of EPA and DHA omega-3s. So you're welcome to take a look at these 3 studies. But if in case you're hearing of these in your research, in your news, I just wanted to make you aware of these particular studies that have been showing a positive benefit of EPA and DHA omega-3s, or EPA and or DHA. Now, GOED itself took a look at at the body of research on EPA and DHA omega-3s, the clinical trials that have been done, and did what we call a meta-analysis of research, where we looked at, it was actually the most comprehensive meta-analysis done on clinical trials to date. And we found that omega-3 supplementation is associated with a reduced risk of heart attack by a significant amount, by 13%, fatal heart attack by 35%, and death from coronary heart disease. All of these significantly impacted by diets that are supplemented with EPA and DHA. What we also saw is that increasing your intake of omega-3s, of EPA and DHA, is showing a nearly linear effect. And I don't want to say it is, it looks like it's dose dependent. Let's put it like that. So what the researchers did is they saw if you add a gram or 1,000 milligrams a day of omega-3s, of EPA and DHA omega-3s, based on the studies that they've done, and they looked at dosages up to 5.5 grams per day. So very high doses of omega-3s, but everything, from 0 to 5.5. You did see that a risk reduction of heart attack and cardiovascular events also increased. The risk reduction increased. So you saw at the higher doses, your risks of these things would decrease. So again, there's, I think that there's enough evidence to show that adding a gram or so, or having about a gram intake of EPA and DHA can really help fight your risk of heart attack and cardiovascular events. So that doesn't mean take buckets of omega-3s, but that certainly means, at least of what we know here in the United States, and I'm sure in Malaysia as well, is that we're not getting enough of these EPA and DHA omega-3 fatty acids in our diet. And making sure that we are taking supplements or supplementing our diet with more omega-3s will help us have these risk reductions. Now, I'm putting on my dietitian hat at this point, and this is just a little bit of language that I think, as we talk about omega-3s, we need to be very, very careful when we give advice, because a lot of times we just tell people you need more omega-3s. You need to get more omega-3s in your diet. But as I explained in the very first couple of slides, is that when we say omega-3s, that could be fish, that could be flax oil, that could be walnuts or seeds or foods that have been fortified with DHA or EPA. And that could also mean supplements. So this is all true. All of these are omega-3s. But when we are talking about the cardiovascular health benefits, we really need to be talking about EPA and DHA omega-3s and the food and supplement sources of those. So we need to refine our language a little bit. Instead of just saying get more omega-3s, we need to be talking about getting more EPA and DHA omega-3s. And again, it's because of those heart health benefits. So what does that mean? What does that look like now in our regular everyday life? So in the United States, and I know around the world, there's some recommendations to eat fatty fish at least twice a week. And what that translates to really is that gives you about 250 milligrams of EPA and DHA on average. So if you take these really fatty fish and kind of average it out over the course of a week, because you're only having it twice a week, that gives you about 250 milligrams, which is fine. And I should add, the fats that you're getting from fish and the EPA and DHA, it stays in your system. It's stored up. So, that's why we only give you a recommendation of eating fish like twice a week, because over time that will average into a daily intake. The problem with this is that you must get these servings of fish at least twice a week. And the fish servings themselves must be good sources of omega-3, of EPA and DHA omega-3s. So it has to be something like salmon or mackerel or sardines or anchovies, or something that's the really oily, really fatty fish. So the lighter fish, that's a less good source of omega-3s, very good source of protein and other nutrients, but it is not going to give you the EPA and DHA omega-3s that you need for your heart health benefits. So what could you do? Well, other ways to get around that to boost your omega-3s is to get a third serving or more fatty fish into your diet, but and or have some foods that have been fortified or added EPA and DHA and or DHA into the diet. So foods such as there's milk that has added DHA, or eggs where the hens, the chickens, are fed diets that are high in omega-3s, so that way the eggs themselves have more omega-3s than a typical farm-raised an egg that you would get from a typical chicken. So fortified foods, those are great, but they're not meant to substitute for a fish serving or even for a supplement. They're just supposed to give you a little bit of an added benefit. So I know when it comes to fortified foods, we're only talking maybe 30 milligrams per serving of EPA or DHA omega-3s, or up to maybe 100 milligrams. But if we're talking about wanting to increase our intake to about 1,000 milligrams, that's going to be a lot of fortified foods. So I would say fortified foods or functional foods, however you describe them, are very good. And you want to, if you have the choice to have foods with added EPA and DHA, I would recommend that choice, but I wouldn't depend on that for your EPA and DHA intake. I would depend on food sources such as fatty fish. But again, making sure that you have the right kind of fish, making sure that you're consistently eating 2 to 3 servings of this fish a week is a good strategy, but I don't think it's necessarily the best strategy. I think the best strategy is to focus on your fish intake, making sure that you're getting enough of the right kinds of fish and you're consistently eating those types of fish twice a week, every week. Choosing fortified foods or functional foods as appropriate, as available as your budgets allow, whenever possible, and taking an omega-3 supplement, because the supplement will give you a specific amount of EPA and DHA omega-3s. You're getting it every day. It's very easy to do. And that way, if your diet is not so great that week, or you're not getting your fatty fish, at least you're getting your EPA and DHA from your supplements. So that is the recommendation that I like to give to people, is to try to cover all of your bases like that. And how to read a supplement label. So this is adapted from a label that you may see in the US, although it's pretty well established in places around the world as well. What I want to explain here is when you're looking at a product, there's many numbers. There's a number on the front of the product, like the omega-3 dosage. Here it says 1280 milligrams. And then there's the EPA and DHA amount in that. So that EPA and DHA amount might not be reflected on the front of the package, of the bottle, of the box, whatever it may be, the liquid. So what you want to do is to look at the supplement facts themselves, to read down to where the EPA and the DHA are outlined, if they are outlined, and add up those numbers. So here we look at the number 2 on the left, the EPA and the DHA, we see 650 milligrams and 450 milligrams. We add that up, and that gives us the 1,200 that would be in this particular product. And look all the way up at the top and see how many of those pills, of those soft gels, we need to get that amount of omega-3s. So there's all sorts of things that you need to look for when it comes to knowing how much omega-3s you're getting in that supplement. So you're looking for the amount of EPA and DHA, and you're looking at what it takes to get that amount, whether it's, the number of soft gels, whether it's the spoonfuls of liquid, etc. So we've talked about food sources of omega-3s. We've talked about getting enough getting supplements. We've talked a little bit about dosage in terms of recommended intakes of your omega-3s. And all of that will give you about what you need. But how do you know exactly how much you need? Well, the only way to know that truly is to get your omega-3 levels tested, which can be done. There's a finger prick test that you can do, just a little dab of blood, send it in. They can tell you how much EPA and DHA is in your blood and what they could call your omega-3 index, and you'll get a percentage of that as an email report to you. And so you are looking for an EPA and DHA omega-3 index of around 8% or so. And so if you're eating all the fish, taking a supplement, etc., and your omega-3 intake still falls below that desirable amount, you need to do something different either in your diet or more likely with your supplement intake to increase your supplements so that you can push your EPA and DHA omega-3 index to a more desirable level. So that is if you like data, if you want to know exactly how much you need, what you're doing is enough, I do recommend getting your levels tested so you know for sure that what you're doing is working for you or not, or any changes that need to be done. And if you do get your omega-3 levels tested and you want to make a change, I recommend waiting do your change and then wait about 6 months for the change to take effect before you do a second test or a subsequent test. And so these are just some summary slides of EPA, just to sum everything up. The ALA, EPA, and DHA are all omega-3s, but we do need to make sure that we focus specifically on the EPA and the DHA omega-3s. These are also, EPA and DHA have a significant impact on preventing heart attack and other cardiovascular related events. And we know that eating fatty fish, eating foods that have omega-3, EPA and DHA added to them, functional foods, and taking an omega-3 supplement is the best strategy for boosting your EPA and DHA omega-3 levels. And my recommendation is to aim for about a gram a day of EPA and DHA omega-3s, or at least as a desirable omega-3 index in order to get those heart health benefits that we described before. Even intake of at least 500 milligrams is something that we should all strive for. I think it's very, very safe to strive for. A gram a day is also excellent, and we could see those measurable effects based on the analysis of the research that has been done. And so with that is the end of my presentation, and I want to turn it over to our next speaker.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alana. And Rajan, over to you. You're muted. Rajan, you're mute. There you go. We still can't hear you. Now it looks like your mute button is on. Your mute button is off, but we still can't hear you. Okay, well, hopefully he will be coming back on shortly and we will work out our technical challenges.
He's back. While we wait, Ellen, there's a few questions that that I know we get pretty often. I can start talking to those.
Sure.
About EPA and DHA omega-3s. A lot of questions that I get as a dietitian. One is that if I eat enough fish, do I even need to worry about this? Excuse me. And my answer to that always is, as described in the slides. Yeah, I would still be concerned. I would still either get your omega-3 levels tested or take an omega-3 supplement, because when it comes to the fish that we eat, again, it needs to be the right kind of fish. We need to consistently provide the fish, consistently eat fish that has good omega-3s in our diet. And quite frankly, we don't always do that. We're human. We have a different, things go on in our lives. So taking a supplement gives you that added reassurance that you're getting what you need. And then the fish intake is extra, is bonus. And you eat fish also, not just for the omega-3s, but for all of the other nutrients that you get in your diets.
So there's a question maybe that is connected to that was in the Q&A about contaminants, whether it's contaminants in fish or contaminants in supplements. Is that something that you should be concerned about?
So when it comes to supplements, the supplements are manufactured are made with they're distilled out any impurities. So supplements are typically free or have very, very low levels of any contaminants. So you don't have to worry about things like mercury and other contaminants in your omega-3 supplements, especially if they are, I should say, if they're GOED members, if they meet certain criteria for quality and ethics in terms of the
Can you guys hear me now?
We can.
Yes, we
Hello.
can. We can.
Good.
Okay.
It's great to get my voice back.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We're just answering some questions while we were waiting for you, but why don't we turn it over to you, and then we can get back to the Q&A at the end.
Okay. All right.
Any slides you want to share?
The slide, Serena knows. No. Overview of omega-3 fatty acids. That's right. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much today. I think it's better that we hear from Alina and we go into Q&A. But very quickly, I want to talk to you about the omega-3 fatty acids. So the omega-3 fatty acids, this is already known. I won't spend too much time on this. In Malaysia, we know heart disease is a problem, and it's a growing one. And it is the leading cause of death, and we expect that this trend will remain even with the rise of cancer. And all the key districts are showing an increase in heart disease and deaths related to it. And it's a principal cause of death among people of all races, right? Although, interesting enough, the risk among the Indian population is much higher. It's almost 1 in 5 Indians. That's the cause of death. So, and it's known. People, they're warned in medical school if an Indian male arrives with chest pain, assume the worst, right? Now, if you look, ischemic heart disease by far is the #1 killer of even women. Although the common perception is, breast cancer kills women. It is true, but heart disease kills more women than all female cancers put together. And again, you will see that for some reason we think that women are protected until their menopause. And then once they go to menopause, the death among females, heart disease linked, is much worse than men. More so if they have pre-existing diabetes and pre-existing obesity. And this is a trend that we are seeing as patients. It affects them as we go. So obviously, we know from the pathology of the disease, it's almost always linked to a formation of some kind of plaque, and mainly the coronary arteries, the arteries going to the heart. And these arteries, in particular, there's one artery called the widowmaker, which causes, or when that artery ruptures, or the plaque ruptures, it causes heart disease, heart attacks. The major risk factors, we know all this. Smoking is obviously a big risk factor, and there has definitely been an improvement of this with less and less smoking men. But there is a new lifestyle increase where women are smoking. Then there's high blood pressure, another very clear link to heart disease. High cholesterol, another link to heart disease. And obviously being obese, being overweight, being physically inactive. And I think seriously the number one killer of not just people with heart disease, but also everybody is high blood sugar, because that is the maker of all these. On the other hand, we've known for a long time that Eskimos have very low heart disease, although they have a diet exclusively living mostly on fat. Whether it's seal oil, whale meat, seal meat, they are rich in fats. And for a long time, this has intrigued us. And fatty acids, they play a very crucial role. And the more people use this, the more they take omega-3, the more we think the risks are, right? I'm not going to go too much into the science today, but basically the longer the chain, the better it is. So the ALA is a shorter chain, the APA is a longer chain, and DHA is the longest chain. And if we understand a little bit about electrochemistry, then we know that the longer the chain, the more the potential for it to absorb inflammatory effects, for it to absorb oxygen and the free radicals, but also to promote electrical movement at the nerve level, at the cell level, and therefore DHA tends to be concentrated where there's a lot of electrical activity, that is the heart, the eye, and of course the brain. I won't go into this today for want of time, right? So part of modern living is the fact that we are eating foods that are very low in omega-3. They're not fresh anymore, they're stored. Very often they've been overly cooked or processed wrongly, microwaved, all of which reduces the omega-3, and therefore that creates a deficiency, a relative deficiency in the system that needs to be addressed. This is interesting because this is a chart of how we evolved, hunter-gatherers, farmers, and eventually today, the industrial people, the people who do all the software coding, do logistics, and build websites and what have you. And we have dramatically changed how and what we eat. Over the last 10,000 years, we're obviously taking more fat, which is not a bad thing, but unfortunately it's mostly saturated fat, and that needs to be looked at. But since the early 1950s, we've increased two kinds of fats that are pro-inflammatory. That is the trans fatty acids. These don't exist in nature. These are done by hydrogenation. So a lot of the products are processed oils contain this. Many of the packaged foods contain this. We all know margarine, for example, is rich in this, right? And of course, the omega-6. As we moved away from being hunter-gatherers into agriculture, the intake of omega-6 has increased, and omega-6 today is farmed, and therefore in the last 30, 40 years, that has increased, and that both the omega-3 fatty acids and the omega-6 fatty acids and the trans fatty acids have a direct correlation to inflammation and to the increase in heart disease. This slide basically echoes what I said earlier. Total fats have gone up, but the wrong kind of fats have gone up. Saturated fats, the N6, the omega-6 fats, that means the plant oils, the soybean oils, the canola oils, the palm oils, this has increased. And the N3, the omega-3, this has decreased. And this is a very clear link. In fact, by doing the omega-6, omega-3 index, we can pretty much predict the existence of heart disease, the growing heart disease risk, and the potential of us having a heart attack. So, in the ratio that it was in prehistoric times, it was 1:1. And, none is bad. omega-6 or omega-3 are not bad. They just need to be in a ratio. Think of it as in your car, right? Think of the omega-6 as the brake pedal and the omega-6 as the accelerator. You need them both. They need to be moderated both, and it should ideally be 1:1. Unfortunately, today, mainly because of our increased intake of plant oils and processed oils, which meant that we reduced the intake of fish and fish-related products and fish-related oils and sea-based oils. Today, the ratio is 10:1, 20:1, and this is horrible if we wanted to maintain good cardiac health. So these are the kind of oils that we are taking. A lot of people think I'm good because I take a lot of soybean oil or sunflower oil or corn oil or peanut oil or canola oil, and that's not necessarily a good thing at all, right? And it's very important that we increase the intake of the omega-3s, but at the same time, make a conscious effort to reduce the intake of the plant-based oils, especially the ones that are very rich in polyunsaturated fats, the soybean oils, the sunflower oils, the corn oils, where they're very, very rich and they are extremely unstable and they create a lot of problems. If you look at olive oil, for example, it is good because it's very low in the poly and very good on the monounsaturated. And this is, if you're cooking with olive oil, don't overcook. It's ideal as garnishing. So in Malaysia, this is data coming, right? So these are the kind of oils we're taking, right? And on top of that, a lot of Malaysians actually go to the pharmacy and they take omega-6 oils like primrose oil, for example. And all these oils tend to actually work against us in terms of promoting inflammation. So, I mean, I did my omega balance just 2 weeks ago. And as you can see, I've got a very healthy ratio. And that is, I'm a good balance, close to 1:1. In fact, the doctor who did it for me says this is the best he has seen thus far, right? And this then gives me the protection I need to prevent inflammation and cardiac disease. So I think we've already spoken about this, so I won't go too much on this, right? But omega-3s have a very important. Think of your body or your heart or whatever as a car, right? So you need the accelerator, which is the pedal that will speed the car up, but you also need a brake to prevent the car from being wearing down or also an accident. So one is not bad, the other one is not good. The key thing, as with everything in life, is balance. There's a very important trial, the GC trial, and the trial has shown that taking omega-3, Italian study, we saw a 45% reduction in sudden cardiac death after 3 months. This is extremely interesting because this is not a drug, but the outcome was better than any drug that we know today in preventing sudden cardiac death and in reducing the overall mortality by 20%. Can you imagine taking one supplement, just one supplement, and that would reduce your risk of overall death by 20%? That would reduce your risk of all your stroke events, heart events, cardiac events by 15%, right? But more importantly, reduce your risk of a sudden cardiac death by up to 45% by just taking one supplement, one pill over a 3-month period, right? So we saw a very important improvement in overall mortality. Interestingly enough, we saw a reduction on the onset of arrhythmias. These are these extremely unstable heartbeats, heart rhythms, which very often, when they happen, allow a clot to form, and then the clot will move itself across the coronaries, and you get your potentially a cardiac event or heart attack. So this is work we have done with Dr. Alexander Leaf of Harvard, and this was done with rats, and we found that once again when we started increasing the saturated fats, the animals had a higher risk of ventricular fibrillation. Olive oil seemed to help very, very minimally. Sunflower seeds will help, but it was fish oil that has a significant impact of stabilizing the heart. As I mentioned earlier, the longer the molecule, the better it is in terms of its electrical conductibility in stabilizing rhythm of the heart. So this was a trial that's interesting. It was done again in Harvard, and they found that in the case of dogs, right? If you see this trial, you understand that right away, you want to be on omega-3. So when we had omega-3, we prevented the rhythm of the rhythm, and we tried to induce a heart attack. The omega-3s prevented the arrhythmias. When we use soybean oil, right, and we induce a heart attack, then the arrhythmias happen, and the dogs would have gone into cardiac arrest. So, who needs fish oil? Well, I really think everybody does, especially when you're over 40. But, if you are a special group of people with cardiovascular risk factors, either you have it yourself or either parent has had it, you've got a high risk of you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, you're diabetic, you have arthritis, or if you have a history of mental disorder, mental illness, depression in the family, all these people would benefit from an omega-3 supplement. In fact, studies are showing, even early in life, when you start with omega-3, it seems to help artery function. It seems to help heart rhythms even in the young kids, right? So the key takeaways are omega-3s are very potent anti-inflammatories. They're natural. They're found in nature. We evolved with them. They're not drug. They work better than drugs. Unfortunately, they're not produced by the body, and they must come from the diet. And the idea is to pack as much omega-3 as you can, and that is increase, and also have omega-3 that's highly absorbed. And taking fish oil, we know from data, is extremely effective. Now, the only problem with fish oils is they're oils, and therefore they're very poorly absorbed. Roughly 1 in 6 parts get absorbed. And therefore, there's a movement worldwide on phospholipids. You might have heard of krill oil being a phospholipid, but we have herring caviar, which we also sell as pristine in pharmacies, pristine MOPL, that tends to stay long in the body. These are triglycerides, what we get when you have your salmon tonight, right? But omega-3 phospholipids are found where life begins, in eggs, in breast milk, and these omega-3s are unique. The ones you find from herring caviar have a very similar ratio as mother's milk, and they have a very strong water lipid layer, and therefore they're very well absorbed in the body. They have a ratio very similar to that of mother's milk. Obviously, a fish roe is rich because, as we know, it all starts in the ocean at the level of the seaweeds and algae, and they get concentrated in the body of the fish, and they end up in the fish roe, where they have an important formation of all the key organs: the eye, skin, brain. Right? We've done it from Stetter. Now, I saw this study many years ago. When I saw it, I decided to move completely from ethyl esters, which is what pristine is, into the phospholipids, which is the omega-3. As you can see, in this study, we got published in 2010. When you add phospholipids, you actually bioaccreate, which means it actually ends up within the rat brain. The rat brain actually becomes more concentrated with omega-3, and in some cases there was even an increase in the weight of the rat brain, right? Obviously, it's available. It's much up to 6 times better absorbed, and it tends to stay much longer in the body. It's also far more stable to oxidation, far less likely to become rancid compared to the other forms of oil. So, basically, it is better absorbed because it can it can dissolve better in water. It can therefore enter into the tissues, enter into the key fatty issues, but specifically end up in the across the blood-brain barrier, right? And we know now today that the brain's DHA is all phospholipid, and it's stored in the brain, and we tend to describe omega-3 fatty acids as storage omega-3s. So they tend to get stored in the body. They tend to get into specific areas of the brain or of the heart. And there's a lot of interest in this, especially in brain diseases, Alzheimer's in particular, but also dementias and early learning disorders in children. So this gets much better absorbed. We're seeing a 1.9 fold increase of absorption into the brain. And I think that's very, very significant. And it tends to stay, once it gets to the brain, it tends to stay in the brain, and therefore in itself, it has a function in the brain. So there are only two sources of marine omega phospholipids. They must come from fish roe, or they come from breast milk, or from milk, but breast milk, human, in the case of humans. And you can get it as a phospholipid in krill as well. Krill is not as high, and also krill tends to be lower in the phospholipids, and krill doesn't have the ratio that you'll find in breast milk, so it's not as well absorbed. So these are the kind of doses we have, and these slides, I'm sure we'll share them with you if you give us your email address, right? And with that, I end the presentation, and I thank you all for your very, very kind attention.
Well, thank you very much, Rajan. Your slides about the human diet through the human evolution are interesting. There's a well-known omega-3 researcher, Dr. Michael Crawford, who believes that we are going to devolve because we are not eating enough omega-3s. So interesting to see how the fats in our diet have changed over the years. So we do have some questions. So let us start with, at what age should we begin consuming fish oil? So this is a great question, because this particular session focused only on heart health, but there's a lot of other benefits. So Alana,
Yes. So fish oil, or omega-3s, EPA and DHA omega-3s, are beneficial throughout life, from even before you're born throughout, till old age, until, all the time. So mothers that are looking to become pregnant, or that are pregnant, should be getting enough EPA and DHA omega-3s, in particular DHA, as Dr. Rajan had said. DHA is concentrated in the brain. It's also concentrated in the retina of the eye. So, and it's important in early fetal development, while the baby is still inside the mother's womb, that the DHA, in particular EPA and DHA, help create the formation of the brain and of the eye. So before you're born, while you're being breastfed, or if you're formula fed, a lot of formulas have DHA and arachidonic acid, which is another fatty acid, to help with brain and eye development, and then throughout the life, because as we said, DHA and EPA are in every single cell of your body. They're important through all of life stages. We tend to think about heart health as we get older, but the fact is that the effects, the heart health benefits, accumulate over time. So if you just now have a heart attack or at risk for heart attack, that's not the time to start your omega-3 regimen, let's say. It's certainly a fine time to start, but really you should be building that up over time, because that will give you all of the heart health benefits and the other benefits, like I said.
And so we just talked about omega-3s being in every cell of the body and being important throughout life. Are there any long-term effects for overconsumption?
No. So omega-3s are, like I said, they're in all of the cells of the body. I can't think of any instances in which there's such, overconsumption. As I mentioned about the meta-analysis, people in some studies were taking upwards of 5.5 grams of EPA and DHA per day, which is a lot. And there is a point in which your body will just kind of give you signals if you're getting too much for the day. You might smell fishy. You might have digestive issues. You might feel a little nauseous. So that's your body telling you that the intake might be too much for you. There's nothing unsafe about it. It's really just unpleasant. So I wouldn't worry about overconsumption. Although I will say, more can be better, but there is such thing as too much. So again, don't take your pill bucket and just throw it all in your mouth. Aiming for 1,000 milligrams per day is perfectly reasonable, and it's far more than what the average person is getting. It's actually, I was looking up, the Ministry of Health in Malaysia does recommend 1,000 milligrams per day of EPA and DHA for people that don't eat fish at all. And I think, even if you do eat fish, like I'm saying, you're really only adding maybe 250 milligrams per day on top of that. So continue to get your 1,000 milligrams, I think.
And there's also been research or science done in Norway, which obviously is a very large fish consuming and omega-3 consuming country, trying to find if there was an upper limit that they needed to recommend, and they couldn't. They could find no issues with taking high doses. Like the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, says 5 grams a day is safe. The US FDA says the same. So and Norway couldn't even find at higher doses any issues. And Rajan showed the slide about the Eskimos. They were eating 10, 15 grams a day. So
18,
so there really are no safety issues.
We've seen Eskimos taking 18 grams a day, without any issues.
Right.
Obviously, there's a big thing about bleeding and all that, which is not true.
Correct.
Omega-3 tends to normalize the blood, not make it thinner. So if your blood is thick, it'll make it thinner. If your blood is thin, it'll make it thicker. So it's a blood normalizer, not a blood thinner like aspirin, right? So I have a case of a friend of mine who was for a long time taking aspirin, and then he switched to omega-3. And he was amused because when he took aspirin and he was shaving and he tended to cut himself, he would bleed for a very long time. When he switched to omega-3 and dropped his aspirin, his platelet time remained the same, but he would cut himself and he would not bleed as long. So it is a blood normalizer, not a blood thinner. And going back to what Elena said earlier, the first effect of taking too much omega-3 would be the fact that you have not enough, or rather you tend to have stomach discomfort, right? You get oily stools, and you'll have stools that smell very fishy. So that's not a good way to flush money down the toilet, but you're not going to go there until you get to 6, 7, 8, 9 grams of omega-3, which I think would be an unreasonable recommendation given where the world is today.
Okay. So a couple of related questions on heart issues. So what would be the right dosage of consumption if we are diagnosed with any heart-related diseases? And kind of a similar question, what are the benefits of fish oil in preventing cardiovascular disease? So Alana, I know you kind of covered this, but maybe just a summary.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I think certainly whatever your doctor recommends, I would go to that first. So when it comes to pharmaceutical dosages, we see upwards of 2, 3, 4 grams per day associated with secondary prevention if you have high triglycerides or heart attack or something like that. So again, I would talk with your doctor before making any kind of dosage recommendation, but generally speaking, an intake of 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram per day of EPA and DHA omega-3s will give you those cardiovascular health benefits. And it's probably more than, whatever, any sort of increase that you provide for yourself will give you increased benefits. So my guess is that for the most part, people are not getting nearly enough omega-3s in their diet. So aiming for that 1 gram a day is a reasonable goal. And that's also in line with the recommendations there in Malaysia.
Yes.
And there are pharmaceutical products on the market that Alana mentioned, the Reduce It trial that had a 4 gram a day dose. So for very high triglycerides, for very specific heart-related concerns, there are recommendations for higher levels, but that's when you definitely would want to talk to your doctor about that.
Yes, yeah. I think, in any case, where you already have pre-existing heart disease and you're on medication, it's the right thing to talk to your healthcare provider, your doctor, because it's not, even if you want to self-medicate, they should know about what you're doing.
Right. So do we all obtain the same benefits of omega-3s, or does it vary from person to person?
It actually does. So the way your body, as I explained in that one slide with all the different enzymatic processes, the way your body, works through those different elongation of the omega-3s, the ALA omega-3s that you get into your diet down to the EPA and DHA, that actually, it's highly genetic of anything to how fast you can, or the rate at which your ALA can be converted to EPA and DHA. So yeah, I mean, generally speaking, everybody is a little bit different in how they metabolize and how their body will process the nutrients that they get from the foods that they eat. Yet another reason, though, why I recommend making sure that you get your EPA and DHA directly from the diet, because that way you know what you're getting for sure, directly from either diet or supplements.
Okay. So is there a difference between herring and krill as a source of fish oil? Is there support that one is better than the other?
Okay, I can answer that. Obviously, herring, caviar, herring is a very sustainable. It's described as the species of least concern in terms of sustainability. Krill has a lot of issues around sustainability because you're going deep into the ocean and taking it right off the ocean floor, where it tends to affect the life of everything else in the marine ecosystem. So krill is definitely, herring roe is definitely more sustainable. Also, herring caviar or herring roe has a closer ratio of DHA EPA to mother's milk. That's the first omega-3 that we all got. And it's the first omega-3 that we all got even prior to birth. The ratio of 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, right? So it is a closer to that. And certainly we've had clinical studies done on psoriasis, inflammation. Long term, we are seeing good endpoints without any destructive side effects.
And let me just add, in terms of nutrients, in terms of omega-3s, I mean, really the EPA and the DHA is what we're talking about. So I like to say, we want to make sure that we're getting those nutrients into our bodies for those health benefits. The source is, there's different reasons that you would choose a krill over a fish, over an algae. There's vegetarian sources. All of these, they will all give you the EPA and the DHA, omega-3s. You just have to choose the type that is going to work best for you and that you're going to enjoy.
Absolutely.
And maybe you kind of just answered this question, Alana, but it was a question of how do I know which fish oil supplement to choose, as there are so many options? What parameters should I look out for? So maybe you kind of answered that. Yeah,
and I'll just add, so there's so many out on the market. Some that are, as people don't like the larger pills, so they'll choose a smaller one, or some will give them what they call fish burps. Some that are marketed to not give fish burps, or that do get, whatever. It depends on your own digestion, your own body. It depends on the foods that you are eating with it. I think Dr. Rajan had said, you want to make sure that you're getting it with some sort of fat in. These are fat soluble, so things that will digest more easily, or at least not give you the fish burps that come. That's basically just things that are coming back up a little bit. So, people ask me this question all the time, and my answer really is, find what works for you. Get your omega-3 levels tested to see that it's working in your body. So what works with you taste-wise, what works with you swallow-wise, and then what's working in your body.
Sure. I mean, if you ask me, the answer is very simple. It's pristine, right? We are the market leader in Malaysia. We've been for the last 12 years. We actually make a money-back guarantee. If you can find any toxin in at any amount at any time, we'll give you 1 million ringgit, which is about $250,000 US, right?
Oh.
So far, nobody's claimed on it, not even our company.
That's putting your money where your mouth is, if you know that
Exactly.
American
Exactly.
idiom. Okay, so I see that I see along the bottom of the screen that we're extending a few more minutes to address some additional questions. So let me see what else is in here. So a question about can omega-3s produce good cholesterol, and could good cholesterol offset bad cholesterol? It's kind of a specific question.
Alina?
So omega-3s and cholesterol. When we talk about omega-3s, we're really talking about the overall cardiovascular health. I know that there's scientific research that's shown, as I mentioned, how they reduce the risk of first heart attack, of fatal heart attack, of subsequent heart attack. They show different benefits for coronary heart disease and cardiovascular events. So in terms of what they do with cholesterol, I think the science is a little bit, there's a lot of uncertainty. So, but overall, omega-3s, EPA and DHA omega-3s have all sorts of effects on these cardiovascular events. And so therefore, I would recommend them to prevent these cardiovascular events.
I think
and triglycerides, and lowering triglycerides.
I think one key important indicator is information, right? So most of us have silent inflammation, and we know inflammation now is linked to cardiac disease. We know it's linked to cancer, and obviously you can take water-soluble nutrients like vitamin C or glutathione to reduce inflammation. But what about inflammation on the lipid side, right? And therefore, it's good to have a lipid-soluble anti-inflammatory, and that's where the omega-3s come in.
This is another pretty specific question. Can a person who has had a heart bypass take omega-3s? I imagine that's a talk to your doctor answer.
That is a talk to your doctor. I mean, I do not want to give medical advice, and I even when it comes to specific things and dosage, I will give you general healthy person dosage. But yeah, I mean, we're so individual, and I don't also know what other medications one might be on and all of that.
Right.
I think once you've been through some procedure, a bypass, pacemaker, then I think you really need to let your doctor know what you're up to, apart from the drugs he's already giving you or she's already giving you. And if your doctor is unsure or wants more data, refer them to some studies, but you need to talk to your doctor.
Right. So I just wanted to go back to the contamination conversation we were having when we had some technical issues in the middle, because I think this is a really important message that I wanted to make sure everyone understood about if you're worried about heavy metals or contaminants in your supplements. So Alana, maybe just let's just readdress that.
Yeah. So like I said, when it comes to creating the omega-3 supplement, the processing, it filters out the contaminants. A lot of people are concerned about mercury or other different types of contaminants, and the processing will remove that. I also get, it's not really a contaminant question, but I get a question a lot about, well, I have a fish allergy or I have a fish, concern. Can I take fish oil? And the answer is, we're talking about fish oils. Allergens and allergies are in the proteins, and the oils are, just fats, oils. So again, I would talk to your doctor first, but generally speaking, there shouldn't be any allergen-specific things in your fish oils, especially those that are processed in a reputable factory.
In fact, your omega-3 status will help you with the allergies. It's quite the opposite, right? If your omega status is good, then your allergies actually will come down. Yes.
Yeah, there's research in prenatal if you take omega-3s prenatally, that it could help in allergies and asthma in offspring. So yeah, there's a lot of correlation there. I would, sorry, go ahead.
It's membrane stabilization. It stabilizes the membranes, and therefore the histamine markers are somewhat contained. So your allergic response is less exaggerated. And that's why there are new studies that, how omega-3 helps with COVID, for example, in the COVID inflammation. Same logic, right? COVID is really a large allergic response, if you like, exaggerated, that causes you to go into category 4, category 5. And there are studies that show your omega-3 status helps you through a COVID crisis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would also add on the contamination question that we've done, GoEd has tested products. We have tested the top 50 products and sent them out to 3 independent laboratories just to be able to say we've done independent research on contaminants, and it really is not an issue. And I think that wasn't true 20 years ago. You know, we really have gotten a lot better at doing the whole processing properly, that we're removing the contaminants and the heavy metals and the mercury and everything. So it really just is not a concern with supplements. So I think for our last question, this is a perfect last question. What are current ongoing research breakthroughs on omega-3s and what we might know for the future? So a little bit of a crystal ball question.
I love these questions. Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit. I think Dr. Rajan even mentioned. Well, first of all, omega-3s, like we said, we focused today on heart health, but omega-3s, the science, the established science, again, there's 40,000 studies that have been done, well, more than 40,000, 4,000 of which done on humans, which is, you know, where we can make the recommendations for human health. There's an abundance of research, and it's really shown that omega-3s are beneficial for the heart, for the brain, for the eyes, and for prenatal health. And there's a lot of other research that's out there. Those are the ones, at least, that we as GoEd focus our education around. But even within those, I see there's a lot, and like I said, Dr. Rajan touched on this, omega-3s in terms of mental health is a hot area of research that we're going to be seeing a lot more of, I think, when it comes to depression or ADHD, you know, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and major depressive disorders. We're seeing some research. I think a lot of it still needs to be borne out, but that's a really hot area of research. Dr. Rajan also mentioned COVID. You know, COVID is a novel coronavirus, so it's still new. There's a lot of research that still needs to be done, but certainly there's work being done in that area as well.
And I would add that we GoEd is building a clinical study database of all human studies, and there are between 200 and 250 new studies published each month. So there's so much research. You know, we are so proud of the body of evidence that we have around omega-3s, but you know, scientists will say we're still in the early stages of understanding all the things that omega-3s can do, because it's in every cell of the body. And it's just there's so much more to be learned with, like Alana said, with cognitive and mental health areas, and then with more lifestyle conditions like exercise recovery, and you know, there's a lot of different areas that I think are really you know, still up and coming. So very exciting.
Skin health, yeah, in skin health.
Well,
so
right, because and the herring roe, you mentioned psoriasis. I know the herring roe in particular, they're doing some really interesting research in psoriasis and skin diseases. So that looks huge, like huge opportunity there. So that's really exciting.
Correct.
So any closing comments, Dr.
Rajan? I think one area that would be interesting going forward would be plant-based omega-3s, given the fact that the world is moving to plant-based. And there's a big thing about, you know, apart from don't kill the fish, right? Don't kill the environment, be sustainable. So I see the rise in plant-based omega-3s, be they from algae or from other sources like flax, which I think will increasingly be getting the air on shows like this, but also the shelf space in health shops and pharmacies. I think that's a trend you can't stop. People are going to go vegan, close to vegan, pro-vegan, vegan-friendly, and therefore I see the rise of plant-based omega-3s as a very important future trend.
Plant-based EPA and DHA omega-3s.
Yeah, I would agree. We're seeing a lot of interest in particularly algae-based omega-3 supplements being developed.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would like to thank you all very much for joining us. Hopefully you learned a new thing or two about omega-3s. And we're happy if there are any follow-up questions to deal with those over social media through email. So please reach out. And we would love to talk to you again in the future about other important omega-3 developments.
On
Thank
a
you.
personal capacity, I wish to thank both Ellen and Elena, right? For it's very early in the US right now. You woke up early for us. I watched the sunrise through the back window of the So good morning to you, and have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you.
And to you.